A dominant weekend for Duke men's basketball in Brooklyn in the first and second round of the NCAA tournament, and now they head to Dallas. What to expect out of Duke, and let's talk a little bit more about why this past weekend Duke basketball reminded people they're a team to watch out for.
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with J.J. Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson, and it's so great to have you here with us on this Tuesday, March 26th, 2024. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop for everything going on in the life of Duke athletics. Today, we're going to talk about why this past weekend the Duke Blue Devils reminded a lot of people they're one of the teams to be on the lookout for when it comes to winning this whole tournament. Duke, one of the top teams in the land throughout the course of the season, and excited to see what they can do in the Sweet 16 against Houston. We'll recap their game against JMU and Vermont with our good pal Kevin Conley, the site expert from Durham, who joins us on today's show. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Watch us each and every day on YouTube, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel. So close to 2,000 subscribers. I've been saying that a lot. I know you want me to stop saying that, so let's make it happen. Let's hit that 2,000 subscriber mark here on the Locked On Blue Devils YouTube feed. All right, without further ado, I'm really excited to bring him on in. It's our good friend Kevin Conley, who joined us not once but twice last week, and that's the number of Duke basketball wins we got to see over the weekend in your neck of the woods. They're at the Barclays Center, Kevin. Duke basketball with the win. How you feeling?
Well, it certainly feels great. Thanks for having me again, JJ. This team saved their best performance of the season for last, I guess. And it buys them at least one more game of what they did against James Madison. And you certainly have to tip your cap. This was the team that everybody, I think, expected to see in the preseason, the team that was ranked second in the preseason poll, the team that many people had penciled in for a Final Four, for a potential national champion. And we finally got to saw it in the biggest moment of the season on Sunday afternoon in the Barclays Center.
And you got to see the Duke basketball team in person. What was the environment like for people that weren't there? How large was the Duke crowd? We see in upsets, as we talk about in March Madness, a lot of people want to start rooting for the underdog. And that's exactly what you even said Friday before you even head to the arena for that first round game, right? The other fans are going to want to kind of see Duke go down, but I know that Duke also showed out pretty strong. What was the atmosphere like?
Well, when you go back to Friday, Duke being in that first game, yes, there were a lot of Duke fans there, but there were also three other fan bases there that were rooting against them. The Vermont fans, the James Madison fans, the Wisconsin fans, obviously they're all rooting for Vermont, wanting to see Duke lose. Then when you look at Sunday, I think all four fan bases were represented really strong. Obviously, Duke has a big fan base and a large New York City base, as does Connecticut, as does Northwestern with a lot of alums in New York City. But man, the James Madison fans really showed out, especially walking around the outside of the arena before the game, even inside the arena too. Ton of James Madison fans. They were standing like the entire game. They were loud, or they tried to be loud. They didn't have much to get loud about. But I will say on Sunday, it didn't feel like as many Northwestern and Connecticut fans were rooting against Duke. But certainly the Duke fans were heard the most just because of how out of reach the game got very early in it.
Yeah, setting the tone early is what we weren't able to see from Duke in some recent games there down the stretch. When you talk about the ACC tournament quarterfinal against NC State, Duke lost their first game of the ACC tournament for the first time since 2013. Pretty wild to think about, over a decade since Duke went one and done in the ACC tournament. So you're wondering, how exactly is Duke going to respond in a weekend like that, and particularly that round of 32 game against the Dukes of James Madison? Duke was the aggressor right away. Very first possession A wide open look for Jared McCain, knocks down a three, 8 3-point made shots for him, 7 of them right off the catch. Only one did he have to do a little bit of work and create the shot for himself. I mean, really clean looks, and Duke set the tone all throughout the game.
Yeah, I think you even go back to that Vermont game as well, and Duke got off to a good start in that one. They built a 10-point lead with about 8 minutes to go in the first half. And then obviously Vermont made a little bit of a run. I think they ended up making it a 2-point game early in the second half before Duke pulled away late. So in comparison to the last 3 games that this team played before the NCAA tournament, in the NC State game in Raleigh, the Carolina game, and then the ACC tournament game against State, where they got off to really bad starts, obviously that was a point of emphasis from John Shire going forward into this NCAA tournament, and they got off to really good starts against Vermont. Had a little bit of a lull there in the middle of the game before closing strong. I think it was a 14-2 run or something like that to end the game. And then obviously the start against James Madison, as you alluded to, it was a Jared McCain 3 to start off the game, and they never looked back, winning by 38. So you really have to tip your cap in that James Madison game that we'll get into a little bit more, I know, that they didn't have a lull. And they really just kept their foot on the gas for the entire 40 minutes.
Really massive win for Duke basketball over JMU. Now they get set for a Sweet 16 date with the Houston Cougars there in Dallas. Going to be a big test, but good things for the Duke basketball team in that first weekend. Let's talk a little bit more about that JMU game specifically, dive into some numbers because, man, they're good to look at, and a whole lot more. We'll do that after we take our first time out here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Locked On Blue Devils also brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big one or a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing with America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut the nets down. FanDuel is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. We keep pushing here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. JJ Jackson alongside my very good friend Kevin Conley, the site expert for Ball Durham. We're taking a look at this JMU box score. If you're watching us on YouTube, the Duke win 93-55. What are some of the big numbers for you, Kev?
Well, I think you have to start first with the 3-point shooting, right? 14 of 28. I mean, that doesn't get much better than that, especially in an NCAA tournament game. But honestly,
impressive. Impressive.
I think numbers that you don't see in the box score, or not even numbers, I should say, things that you aren't going to see in the box score really stood out to me the most. And the number one thing is that James Madison wanted to come out with this mentality of being tougher than Duke and wanting to push Duke around. They kind of did it against Wisconsin. And really, in that game against Wisconsin, James Madison was the better team for the entire 40 minutes, and it really wasn't close. So they tried to come out with that same mentality. And one of the big topics around this Duke team is that they can't take a punch. They're not very tough. If you try and push them around, they don't really punch back. Now, obviously, if you're making 14 of 28 3-pointers and Jared McCain hit 6 3-pointers and a half, you don't need to be that tough. But there was a toughness with this Duke team. There was a focus. There was an energy that you won't see in the box score that obviously was translated when you put the game back on and you watch the film or you watch the replay of the game. And I think that's going to be a major point of contention going into this Houston game. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show, but really impressed with how this team responded, given James Madison wanting to come out and wanting to push this team around and try and make it a physical game. And Duke just did not let it happen. And when it was, they matched the physicality right off the bat.
Just great stuff from this Duke basketball team. The three-point shooting, I thought, was a massive difference. When you look at, 10 makes is the difference in this basketball game for the two teams. That's 30 points in three-point territory. Duke wins by 38. I mean, just big stuff right there. Love to see Tyrese Proctor get his shot going as well a little bit for this Duke team, making 4 attempts from the outside, or 4 makes in 10 attempts, 40% shooting for Proctor, had 5 assists in a game like that. And this is the Tyrese Proctor that we saw in March a year ago that people were thinking going into this season, hey, this could be like a lottery pick because this guy is so big at 6'5" at that guard spot and can knock down shots from the outside. Even his non-3-point makes, Kevin, were like really tough shots. That was some next level stuff.
Yeah, it's him starting to see the ball go through the basket. That was big. He got a couple of open looks. I think the way Duke operated offensively, James Madison wasn't ready for it because there was, especially in the second half, in that little short corner to wing area right in front of the Duke bench, there was a ton of open shots that just James Madison just wasn't defending on the floor. I do also want to point out the game of Kyle Filipowski, even going back to the Vermont game. Obviously, he doesn't make a field goal against Vermont, but I think he still had 12 rebounds and 4 assists. Battled foul trouble here against James Madison. Only 21 minutes, but still has 14 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. I thought he played a really strong game against the Dukes, although obviously the guards are going to be dominated the conversation with how well they shot the basketball.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Really love the makes from that guard team, from the guards for Duke in particular. My one thing, my one bone to pick with our buddy Tyrese Proctor, and yes, we are buddies. I'll claim that here today, having never spoke to him in my life, but that's the Duke basketball fanhood that we have. My one bone to pick with our buddy Tyrese was that the 3-point make in the corner when you set yourself up for the 4-point play opportunity. He couldn't quite get that free throw to go. It's just a pet peeve of mine, Kevin. When you make the 3-point shot, they foul you, and you get to flex a little bit because you got the 4-point play opportunity coming. Come on, I would have loved to see that free throw go down.
Yeah, that would have been nice to see go down, but for the most part, this team did shoot it well from the free throw line, 13 of 18. It took a ton of free throws against Vermont. And remember, JJ, that's kind of what we talked about last week when we were previewing that Vermont game. Just said Duke is too big, that Vermont doesn't have anyone to match their size. They're too physical, and it resulted at the free throw line. That's kind of was the expectation we had going into that game, and it played out. And this was kind of the opposite. James Madison shot more free throws than Duke did in this game, but the Dukes just weren't able to capitalize. And you wonder, especially how much they struggled in the first half from the free throw line, James Madison, if they made a couple more, and I think they missed a couple of front ends of 1-and-1s as well. Could that have given them a little bit more juice to try and hang around a little bit longer with Duke? Although probably wouldn't have mattered if Duke is making 14 3-pointers in a game. There's not many teams in the country that could beat them. But again, second straight time where this Duke defense has been phenomenal. They hold Vermont to under 50. They hold James Madison to 55, both well under their scoring averages for the season. So if Duke can continue to make the 3-pointers, which is a tough ask to have a team consistently go 50% from 3-point range and play this defense that they're have played the first 2 games of the NCAA tournament, as the competition is obviously going to take a major step up now. This team's going to be tough to beat.
And on that number of attempts, again, 28 attempts to be 50%, right? It's one thing if your team is 5 of 10 or 6 of 12 from 3-point range. Duke kept shooting the open looks, and they kept going in for the most part. Really, really good stuff. I want to talk more about the defense, though, because this defense, to your point, was suffocating all throughout the weekend. I thought the guards were really aggressive and picking up the guards for both Vermont and JMU. These two teams were not necessarily physically imposing, but Duke, when we talk about the depth of this team, now minus Caleb Foster for the remainder of the season, that could be pretty tough for your guards to be out there and have to be so aggressive throughout the course of the game. And yet Duke was able to do that. On the defensive end, they set the tone from the get-go.
Well, they did. And remember, early in the game, Jeremy Roach goes out with a dislocated pinky. And he looked like he was in a ton of pain on the bench. I think he probably sat there for about 4 or 5 minutes of game time, and Jalen Blakes had to come in. And then obviously Blakes' status, I think, is still uncertain. Obviously, John Shire said he was going to undergo more tests when the team got back to Durham on Monday. They got back late Sunday night, and those tests were going to happen yesterday. So I think John Shire, I'm not sure if he'll address the media before the team leaves for Dallas, but certainly when they get there, we'll get an update on Jalen Blake's status after his scary fall in the second half. Obviously, it was a great sign, I think, that he came running back onto the bench out of the locker room after taking that fall, where honestly it looked like he was knocked out cold for a couple of seconds there.
Yeah.
And you knock on wood and hope that he is available to play. But if he's not, I don't know where this team goes for guard depth on the bench. I mean, we talked about how Jared McCain and Jeremy Roach and Tyrese Proctor are going to have to play close to 40 minutes. But we were expecting Jalen Blakes to at least shoulder some of those minutes and play the 5 to 8 minutes a game where you can get some of those guys a rest. But if he's out, and again, don't know if he is, hope he's not, hope he's ready to play on Friday night against Houston and Dallas, they have to play 40 minutes unless you go deep into your bench. And I don't know how often it's been this season that you play Sean Stewart, Kyle Filipowski, and Mark Mitchell on the floor at one time with two guards. But that's something really everyone has to monitor going into the Sweet 16.
And credit to you, Kevin. We were talking just last week. We've got minutes to give out with a depleted bench. You're saying maybe it's more for Jalen Blakes. I still like the idea of playing TJ Power a little bit more like we had seen from Duke down the stretch. And we got more of those Blakes minutes over this weekend. To your point, had that injury not taken place, we would have seen him out there a whole lot more. Before we go to our next break, I got to give John Shire a little bit of praise here as well. We mentioned kind of the defensive game plan and how aggressive Duke was, making the shots from the outside, setting up Filipowski for some successful attempts right at the rim as well. But even like the baseline out of bounds plays that Duke was able to, their blob plays, so to speak, getting the open looks. I mean, when Duke's able to set something up, they've been really good through these first two games in March Madness, and I hope that can continue against Houston.
Well, a lot of that focus has been on Kyle Filipowski, right? So Vermont made a conscious effort. Anytime Filipowski got the ball on the low block, a double team was coming right away. And that's why you saw him only take one field goal attempt. And honestly, he probably should have had more than 4 assists in that game. For James Madison, Duke put them in a lot of ball screens with Filipowski. And John Shire wanted to see how they were going to guard him. Were they going to bring doubles every time he got the ball? Were they going to stunt him? And they were drawing up their plays based on those actions and how James Madison would react. And you have to give credit to John Shire and the coaching staff for having this team fully prepared about what teams are going to do to Kyle Filipowski, because that's who the opponent wants to shut down. They want to shut down Kyle Filipowski. And he's able to pass. He's a really good passer. I think that's part of his game that's not talked about a lot. And he showed it again while getting his points against James Madison, also setting up players like Jeremy Roach and Tyrese Proctor and Jared McCain for open shots.
James Madison scored 55 points in the round of 32. Duke scored 93. Really impressive win for the Duke Blue Devils as they advance to the Sweet 16. Let's talk about Houston, the next team coming up for this Duke basketball team. And we'll do that after we take our next time out here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at Nissan. This week's March Madness bracket highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that pushed it further than the rest, just like all of the new 2024 Nissan SUVs. Talking about the Armada, Pathfinder, and Rogue. One team that matches up to these, as these guys were able to take it to the next level. The NC State Wolfpack are obviously this week's Nissan Rogue. The team absolutely surprised us all with the powerful performance in their first 2 games of the tournament. Wins over Texas Tech and Oakland have them set up to play Marquette in the Sweet 16. They say win life, go Rogue, and that's exactly what the Wolfpack have done here. Take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. We're talking about shopnissanusa.com. Moving forward here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils, JJ Jackson alongside my pal Kevin Conley, the site expert for Ball Durham, Duke, and Houston in the Sweet 16 from Dallas. When you look at this game, Kevin, what are you thinking? What stands out to you?
Boy, I think it's going to be a war. I think it's going to be an absolute war. Both teams are going to be physical. Houston's built on defense. Obviously, I think everybody was watching their game Sunday night when Texas A&M made that furious comeback, the buzzer beater to send it into overtime, and then Houston having to play walk-ons due to foul trouble in overtime, coming up with a big free throw to make it a 2-possession game and holding on to win that game. But I think it's going to be a war. It's going to be a road game, obviously. Houston, the top seed, gets the favorable location of getting to play in their home state of Dallas, so Duke has to go to the state of Texas to play Houston in the Sweet 16, which was going to be the case anyway because Houston was playing Texas A&M in that round of 32, so it was going to be a road game for Duke no matter what. But yeah, I think this game is going to be an absolute war between these two sides, and honestly, I don't want to put it all into the hands of the officials, but I think the way this game is officiated is going to play a major factor in who ends up winning it. Just because Houston likes to be really physical. And if the game has a tight whistle and some foul trouble starts to mount on Houston early, they're going to probably pull back and be less aggressive defensively. And if Duke can get to the free throw line and make those free throws and free points, that would be big. But obviously getting Houston's top guards into foul trouble would be massive like they had against Texas A&M. So I do think the way the game is officiated could play a major factor in how or whoever wins this game.
Houston is the 1 seed in the South region. Duke, of course, is the 4 seed. Duke 26-8 on the season. Houston is 32-4. Our friends at FanDuel have the Cougars favored by 4.5 points. Right now, the ESPN Basketball Power Index and ESPN Analytics give Houston a 76.7% chance to win the game, just 23.3% chance for Duke. Quinn Cook famously said Duke is never the underdog, and that has been a motto that the Duke basketball team loves to kind of embody and embrace when they do feel like they're the underdog in games like this. Really excited to see this matchup play out because, to your point, Houston has some guards, but guess what? Duke does too. I think the guards can level one another out on both sides. The question to me becomes, what version of Kyle Filipowski is Duke going to have? How does Houston implement a game plan to slow down what Filipowski wants to do? Because in the big concern, Kevin, and your point about how this game is officiated, Filipowski, it's in foul trouble, man. I mean, time and time again, we're talking about Flip and foul trouble.
Yeah, that's been an issue for him over the past couple of games. Now, he will have the size advantage in terms of height inside, but I think that's going to be the one way Duke will try to offset Houston's guard play. LJ Cryer, Jamal Shed, just phenomenal guards. They can shoot it. They can score at all 3 levels. On any given night, any one of those players can go for 35. But I think the tape of what Iowa State did to Houston in the Big 12 championship game will be playing on a constant loop in John Shire's office this week. I think Iowa State laid out the game plan defensively on how to try and stop Houston and slow down their guards. So there is some sort of a blueprint. Now, remember, I believe it was last year these two teams played in a secret scrimmage down in Houston, so maybe there's some familiarity for John Shire going up against Kelvin Sampson and some of these players that returned from Houston. I know rosters change a lot, but that's something else to keep in the back of your mind as everyone gets set for Friday night. And it's going to be a late Friday night, let's be honest. It's the second game down in Dallas. It's scheduled for 9:39, but let's be honest, that first game is not going to be 2 hours on the nose. It's probably going to be closer to a 10 o'clock tip-off, and it could be a late night, Friday night in Dallas or wherever everyone is watching.
Yeah, no doubt about that, Kevin. And let me shout out the Locked On Blue Devils listeners out there as well, right? When we're talking about this Duke and Houston game going into the Sweet 16. Within the last 24 hours, outside of yesterday's show, right, the Monday show where we recap the JMU win, the most watched video here on Locked On Blue Devils was my episode right after last season's secret scrimmage against Houston. So even before last year began, that's been the most watched video here on Locked On Blue Devils within the last 24 hours. So much so that I had to go back and, okay, what were we talking about a little bit here? The numbers that we found, Houston had won that game 62-50 in just a 32-minute scrimmage. Duke did not have Derek Lively II and Tariq Whitehead available due to injuries in that scrimmage. Of course, Duke did not have any of the freshmen on this year's team. Duke fans out there, I see you guys doing your homework, going back and looking at their stuff as well. Speaking of doing your homework, you need to do us a favor and go check out all of the written work at balldurham.com. Right, Kevin? Tell us a little bit about the website.
Yeah, so we're still wrapping up coverage from Brooklyn and Duke's run to getting to the Sweet 16. Then obviously this week we'll turn our attention to this matchup against Houston and get into all the details about it. Been looking through some of the numbers both teams have put up this year. Houston, number one scoring defense, averaging opponents to score under 60 points per game. Duke not bad in itself. They're a top 40 defense, top 30 borderline. Teams only scoring about 67 points per game against the Blue Devils. So Duke's offense, though, is a lot better, more efficient than Houston's in terms of the numbers. So it's going to be an interesting contrast of styles. Who will win out, offense or defense? If it's a high-scoring game, I think I'm going to like Duke's chances in it. Low-scoring game probably favors Houston.
Excited to see all of it come together and what it looks like for this Duke basketball team. Kevin, your time is always greatly appreciated. Thanks once again for stopping by the show today.
Thanks, JJ.
All right, that's Kevin Conley, again, the site expert from Ball Durham. Go check him out at Kevin Conley 24 on X, also Ball_Durham. I'm on X as well at _JJ_Jackson_, and follow the show at LO_Blue Devils. That's going to do it for our show here today. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you again tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.